the tomato is both a fruit and a vegetable. And here is why. In 1893, the US Supreme Court ruled on a landmark decision, which might seem like an arbitrary thing or even stupid, but it did have an effect on how we think of tomatoes. That's right, there was a lawsuit surrounding the question whether it classifies as a fruit or a vegetable, and this debate got all the way up to the Supreme Court. But more on this later. Let me start off with saying that I'm not a botanist or a plant biologist, so anything I say could be missing some things or I could just be wrong. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Let's start off with the most scientific sounding explanation. Botany is the science of plants. It can mean a bunch of things, but mostly it means that botanists are biologists who study them. And being a science, it has a bunch of terminology and names for whatever, one of which is the definition of fruit. What is a fruit according to botany, you might ask? It is a seed-bearing structure, a crop which is formed from parts of the flower of the plant. So, apples, pears, oranges, cherries, and, tomatoes. And peppers, and zucchini, and squash, and pumpkin, and eggplant, and cucumber, and we, as a society, decided that the debate should be on poor tomatoes and we shouldn't talk about all the others. If the tomato is a fruit, then all of these are. And here is when I mention how botany uses the term fruit and how the rest of us do. In botany, it doesn't necessarily mean something we would normally associate with the word, something sweet and juicy. We have expressions like fruit of our labor, and some people say fruit of the womb, referring to children. Why, though? Anyway, you don't picture a sweet bulb of edible goodness when doing productive things or when you think of children. Oh god. In this sense, both mean a result, a product of a process. As do botanists mean it, I think, where fruit is a narrower term for crop. Okay, with that out of the way, let's move on to the term vegetable. This one isn't nearly as clear-cut as the other. It can mean any part of a plant we eat, stems, roots, leaves, flowers, seeds, and just to make matters worse, fruits. So just to recap, a tomato is a fruit because it contains seeds and is formed from a flower, but is also a vegetable because it is part of a plant we eat. Makes sense, cucumbers and peppers are fruits and cherries and apples are also vegetables. This is like an all bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs thing, but with plants. Therefore, botanically, tomato is definitely a fruit because it fits the definition of a fruit, but if you don't care about being that specific, but you should, this is science we're talking about. You can also definitely call it a vegetable just as easily as you could an orange. But we all know how everyone in the world is so keen on using scientific terminology correctly, and I have never in my life seen a scientific paper that's only purpose was to whine about other scientists not using some scientific terminology exactly right. Joking aside, how does the general public use fruit and vegetable as terms then? When we don't talk about them scientifically, fruits are generally sweet with some exceptions and are mostly used in sweet dishes and desserts, while vegetables are usually savory and are used as such. Not all of them though. This, for example, is quite sweet, but I don't think I would want to eat a cake filled with it. Probably the least precise thing here is mushrooms. They are treated as vegetables, often even referred to as such, but are not even plants. Nor animals, for that matter. They are their own entire thing. Also, the terms here are mutually exclusive. You don't want to confuse ordinary folk by the whole, actually, this is technically a fruit. Or, do you? Looking at the issue from a culinary perspective isn't that straightforward either, but not because of the terminology. You classify something as a fruit or a vegetable by consensus here, and it just can't be both. But Just because something classifies as either a fruit or a vegetable doesn't mean you can only use them as you would expect. You know what is definitely a vegetable botanically, but not at all used as one in cooking? Rhubarb. Going back to the Supreme Court decision from the beginning of the video, we did pick Port Tomato to be the center of this debate, and I'm pretty certain this is the reason. It was between the largest sellers of produce in New York at that time and Edward L. Ledden, the collector of the Port of New York. It was first filed because of a tax on imported vegetables but not fruit. And Nix argued that since botanically the tomato classifies as a fruit, it shouldn't be affected by this tax, but the court ruled that the use of fruit or vegetable in farming and trade was different than in the dictionary, and they did read lots of definitions from dictionaries in court, partly because they did not refer to the tomato as a fruit before the tax was implemented. They did acknowledge that botanically it does classify as a fruit, as do many other vegetables. When I started researching for this video, I thought I had a definitive answer in my head about where this thing belongs, but as I kept on researching it, that clear line slowly dissolved and became more and more of a mess, which is exactly what happens if you try to understand something in depth. Don't be mistaken, that is not a bad thing. Nothing is black and white, and the more you know about something, the more shades of grey you will start to see. This is not a 50 Shades of Grey reference. It also says a lot about our need to put everything and everyone into boxes. These boxes do help sometimes, but many cases they can cause even more confusion when you try to fit something in them that is not nearly as regular shaped as it should be to fit comfortably. And the answer is not cutting off some corners so they do fit. Maybe consider abandoning the box. You don't always need them anyway.